Welcome, everybody, to Beyond the Shadows. We have a great show coming up for you tonight. A final Beyond the Shadows for 2020 coming up right now. Welcome back, everybody, to Beyond the Shadows. I'm author and ghost historian Mike Ricksecker. Of course, I have Quarantine Ghost down in the chat, so thank you, Quarantine Ghost, for... this is our last 2020 show. We did our last Edge of the Rabbit Hole a few minutes ago. This is our last Beyond the Shadows for the year, so Quarantine Ghost down there in the chat, haunting away. So we have a bit of a different show coming up for you tonight to end the year. This is kind of like a recap episode. We're going to be hitting a lot of different topics. We're going to be really all over the place, really hitting everything that we talked about this year, and as some other things as well. So first things first, as we get into the show here, of course, thank you all for joining us on Beyond the Shadows. This episode of Beyond the Shadows is brought to you by 100 Road Roast. It helps you hunt ghosts. That is our coffee. You can find that out there on hauntedroadmedia.com or my website, MikeRicksecker.com. And this is really the final hour that you can cash in on those holiday deals on my website, so you can get that coffee out there. A lot of you have, which is great. You can get some different gift sets out there, like the Walk in the Shadows book, a ghosty coffee, all the books out there right now, and everything's discounted. Autographed books that are deeply discounted. We got the T-shirts that are still available, 25% off. So a lot of different things out there for the holidays. And I've done the cutoff right now at the 15th because shipping right now, if you've been watching any of the news when it comes to the shipping, especially with the U.S. Postal Service, it's really, really bogged down. So I've made today the cutoff. So if you want that stuff, get the orders in. If you're ordering through Amazon or whatever, which isn't autographed, they do their own shipping. But anything directly from me that's autographed, etc., or the gift packs, the coffee, all that, today's the day. So there we go. All right. So a couple other things before we jump into the topics for the evening. Just something I want to throw out there, because I know some of you will, whatever term you use, whether it's you're putting good energy or vibes out there, or you consider yourself a prayer warrior, or what have you. I got the news a couple weeks ago that my aunt and uncle in a nursing home local here had both contracted COVID. Hers was a milder case. His was more severe. She seems to be doing okay-ish right now. I got the news earlier this evening that the priest came by tonight to read him his last rites, and they have him on morphine right now for the pain. So whatever positive energy you can to put out there for my Uncle Jim, I would greatly appreciate it. His health has not been good for years. One of the reasons why he's in the nursing home to begin with. So something like this coming around, and that nursing home has had COVID within it before earlier this year, and thankfully my aunt and uncle were okay then, but came back around, and now it's hit them. So any energy you can muster there would be greatly appreciated. So we'll talk a little bit about COVID this evening anyway. I don't want to drag down the evening, but just again, just kind of looking for positive energy, vibes, prayers, whatever you call it, juju, whatever your uh, beliefs are, anything positive, I believe will help. So, thank you. All right. Also, before we roll into the rest of this, uh, I want to let you guys know that not only is this the last Beyond the Shadows for 2020, this is the last time that Beyond the Shadows will broadcast on the Edge of the Rabbit Hole YouTube channel. So we are doing both Edge of the Rabbit Hole and Beyond the Shadows on the Haunted Road Media channel before. Last year or earlier this year, that was one of the very first things that kicked off the year. Is we brought Edge of the Rabbit Hole and Beyond the Shadows from the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel to the Edge of the Rabbit Hole channel. And of course, we have all the podcasts and everything out there. Beyond the Shadows will still be a podcast weekly, and the video segment of that will be broadcast elsewhere. So I'm not divulging too many details on that right now. It will have a different video platform, but not here on YouTube where this broadcasts live. But again, the podcast will still go out to like Spotify, iHeartRadio, all that. It will still be on KGR Radio, but the video live stream will be elsewhere. And there'll be more details about that at the beginning of 2021. So be on the lookout for all of that. All right. So without further ado, and I appreciate all the comments down in the chat for my Uncle Jim. I really do appreciate that. So thank you very much. All right. So take a breath here. Get a sip of water. So we can do this. All right. So before COVID and all the craziness started at the beginning of this year, I had a book come out. And so that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with A Walk in the Shadows. A Complete Guide to Shadow People came out January 21st. So I want to start the conversation tonight with our favorite topic of the year, shadow people, because there has been a lot that we've done with shadow people this year. When the book came out, we had a number of different Beyond the Shadows episodes about shadow people. There were a number of videos on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel that we put together about shadow people. So if you go out there, you see this huge playlist for shadow people on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel. And then throughout the year, we also addressed some other topics, kind of coming back, every several weeks to continue the conversation about shadow people. And then we had the Unveiling the Shadows workshop back in October, where we covered some other topics that weren't covered here. Well, there was a lot that was from the book as well, and from some of the other shows and presentations. But then I added in some additional information as well, and that actually went over the amount of time and never got to some of the other little details that were there. So that's where we started the conversation for the year. And if you have shadow people questions, by all means, go ahead, throw them down in the chat. And any of the topics that we're going to hit tonight, go ahead, throw them down in the chat, because this is going to be a smorgasbord of all kinds of things. I mean, there's so many different topics. I actually have show notes for this evening. I usually don't have show notes. I just kind of go off of some photos that I throw together, and we're just doing it. So yeah, most of the shows are just really off the cuff for me, but I have show notes for this one. So there was a book released January 21st, and that book is broken into basically 4 different parts. And I talk a lot about these things during my lectures, and I only gave one lecture, one presentation the entire year. That was back in February, the very, very beginning of February, at a small event that Robin Terry put on in Illinois. And then that was it, because COVID took over and no events for the rest of the year. So we cover types of shadow people, each type getting its own chapter. So humanoid figure, Hat Man, the hooded figure, the crawler, the mist, the wisp, a whole variety of different types of shadows, because we as humans like to try to categorize whatever it is, whether it's, birds or flowers or leaves or trees. We do this because we're trying to make sense of our environment. So we do the same thing with these shadow entities. We're trying to make sense of what these things are. So, okay, let's take the observations that we've been able to gather over the millennia and see if we can make some sense of what these things are. First thing up, okay, let's separate them out by type. So that's what we do at the beginning of the book. That's the first section of the book. The second section is on sleep paralysis, because there's a lot of a lot of questions come about when it comes to sleep paralysis and observing a shadow person. It's always been a pet peeve of mine when the medical community tries to say that, well, shadow people are just really hallucinations that you observe when you wake up and you're experiencing sleep paralysis. Your mind is still in a dream state, and that's part of your dream playing out in front of you. And I've always had a problem with that because I've actually had sleep paralysis, and I've never seen a shadow person when I've had sleep paralysis. Some people do. I'm not saying that does not happen. But for the medical community to say that it's just a hallucination, I have a problem with, because when people observe a shadow person during sleep paralysis, it's always a person. It's never, you don't ever hear about shadow planes or shadow trains going through the room. I always make the joke about I've had dreams of because we dream about all kinds of different things. If there's no motorcycle going through the room or car or trees or what have you. It's always a person. And I always crack the joke that I have dreams sometimes, every once in a while. I've had dreams of being on stage with Motley Crue, and I've never woken up to pyrotechnics going off and 10,000 people in my room and the drum kit and the guitars and all that crazy stuff going on. It's fun, and as cool as that would be, it's never happened. Of course, I dream about all kinds of different things, but those things have never just shown up in my room as a hallucination. So, long story short, too late. What I believe with the whole sleep paralysis and seeing a shadow person, I believe what's happening is you are actually being woken up by that shadow entity. Sleep paralysis is a real biological phenomenon. Your body has paralyzed itself so that you don't act out your dreams during your sleep. This is a legit thing. Well, sometimes we do wake up when we experience sleep paralysis. Sometimes it's the other way around, where your body just, boom, shuts down and your mind is still awake, which is the way it usually happens with me. But what I think is happening in people who have had children, this is something that you can relate to. So with my kids, especially my youngest, Cameron, in the middle of the night, they wake up, they've had a bad dream, need a drink of water, need to use the bathroom, and for whatever reason they came to tell me instead of just going. They wouldn't always tap me and say, "Hey, Dad." Sometimes, a lot of times with Cameron, they would just come up to the bed and stand there. And it, kind of like creepy. You wake up and you're like, "Whoa, Cameron, what are you doing?" And the reason why you've woken up is because you felt their presence there. You felt their energy. That's what woke you up. They didn't actually touch you or tap you or whatever. I mean, kids will, "Hey, Mom, Dad." But a lot of times my kids wouldn't. And Cameron especially would not. He'd just stand there and stare. But I would feel the energy wake me up. And that's what happens a lot of times. People will feel the energy of their kids when they approach. And they're like, "Oh, okay, you're there." That's what's happening, I believe, with these shadow people that you see in the room, is that their presence, their energy wakes you up. You feel them there. But sometimes when we wake in that situation, we're still feeling that sleep paralysis. So it's not a hallucination that we're seeing. It is an actual shadow person. They're actually what woke us up. But our body's going through the natural sleep paralysis phenomena. So it's two different phenomena, but sometimes they can happen at the same time. See some questions coming in, so I'll go ahead and grab these before I continue on. Alina the fam, I have a question. What do you hope and wish for Christmas in the new year, Mike? Um, let's get to that. I just saw a question came in and actually read it. We'll get to that in a moment. That's a very, very good question. Um, and we'll come back to what I want for Christmas and the new year and all that. I mean, definitely, I have a lot of goals set for 2021. 2021 is going to be a very, very different year. Um, there are a number of different projects and things going on uh, with my writing, with Haunted Road Media, expanding in a lot of different areas. I guess I'll just answer it now. Expanding in a lot of different areas, and so I mean, my personal life is is going really well right now. I'm very, very happy. That was another big change during 2020. There were some major, major life changes, but those have all been for the best. It's been absolutely amazing. I've been with Nicole now for quite a while. She is like the most amazing person that I've met, and we're having a great time. It's like we have fun every day. And that's and that's definitely a good thing. We really have a lot of fun together, and we're totally in sync with each other. It's funny. We'll like say the same thing sometimes, or we'll just like sigh at the exact same time, or we're like sync. It's been amazing, and family's right down the road. We're so it's that has been an amazing development for 2020. So personally, I want that stuff to continue. As far as my relationships with her, family, all that stuff. I want all those things to continue. As far as like the writing, Haunted Road Media, the video projects, the Shadow Dimension video project will be coming out here in a few months. It's been a lot more work than I thought it was going to be, but it's fantastic. I've brought a lot of people in, a lot of special guests. So that's a fantastic project. So, it's like I want that to be successful. I have 2 books that I'm writing on. The first that's going to come out is the Alaska Triangle book. I'm also second edition of this book here, Walk in the Shadows. I haven't talked about that, but there is a second edition that'll be coming out for that. Everything that I was just talking about at the very beginning of the show with Beyond the Shadows, basically taking that to a new platform. That whole new platform is a big thing. And there's other things going on with 2021, like the Egypt trip, the Ireland trip that, Victoria and several others are going to be on. Nicole's going to be there too. That's going to be absolutely amazing. So, and again, if you haven't yet, check it out. So there's links on my website, MikeRicksecker.com, July 1st through 9th. That's going to be an absolutely fantastic tour of Ireland. So these things I'm extremely looking forward to. I just, as long as we can push through COVID and that doesn't, we got the vaccinations coming out now. So as long as that does not get in the way of some of these things, it's going to be a great year. So, and I know QG threw it out there earlier. I was nominated for 2 awards with Paranormal Rewind. So go to paranormalrewind.com, or I know QG threw the links down there during Edge of the Rabbit Hole. I was nominated for a couple of awards there. Best book for A Walk in the Shadows, and also for Paranormal Trailblazer. So for those of you that have not yet, please kindly ask, please go out there and vote. So, all right. So without further ado, to kind of just finish up with Shadow People here, and by all means, if you guys have questions, throw them down in the chat. There's the interdimensional beings. So there's the section of the book where I get into interdimensional beings. Shadow animals are in there, what I call the WTF shadows, like what in the world are these type of shadows? Shadows out in the wild, so out in the woods. We get into simulated universe. Are they time travelers? A lot of those different types of what ifs. Could they possibly be extraterrestrials? The Laughlin UFO mega conference coming up here into February, beginning of March. I'm specifically going to be speaking an entire presentation on just that itself. Are some of these shadow entities extraterrestrials? So I'm expanding that whole line of conversation coming up here next year as well. So a couple things that I added in for those that were part of Unveiling the Shadows, a couple things that I added into that presentation that I'm expanding more and more on, especially as I go down the whole shadow dimensions route. I added some other things in there like doppelgangers, astral projections are some of these shadow entities that we witness actually astral projections of other people. Of course, doppelgangers, I got into, we did a whole Beyond the Shadows show on doppelgangers back, what was that, late August, early September? And that was really fascinating because we did the video on the Haunted Road Media channel as well, in which if you look at a lot of these reports of doppelgangers, and I used some historic ones like Goethe and Emily Sage, got a personal experience from our friend Meg Fisher and one that she had put in her book that she released back in October. And what's fascinating is if you just get into what these people were witnessing, they were in a way seeing what could have been a time slip. So was it really, like an evil twin? And people get into the celebrity lookalikes. And it's like, we're not talking about that. We're talking about, somebody actually seeing, like Goethe, so basically saw himself walking down the road when he was a younger man. Didn't realize it was himself, but as an older man, he's walking down that same road wearing the clothing that he had seen when he was a younger man. He realizes, wait a minute, I saw myself. It's a time slip. So interesting topics like that, but are some of these things that we see like that in regards to shadows, are they actually like doppelgangers or the astral projections? So we're getting into a lot of these other types of supernatural phenomena as well that could be playing out as shadows. Then, of course, we have the section of, are they evil? Are they demons? Things like that. And, of course, some shadows that we witness, that we interact with, sure, some of them are. Not all of them. And in fact, a great number of them are not, which is a very common misconception with our field. Those people that say that, well, all shadow entities are evil, or are the darkest of the dark, the evil, the most evil of all supernatural entities, and they're just not. Some of them, yes, are very nasty and nefarious, and I've been on those cases. Most of them, though, are just watching and observing, and are just standing there, which is why we put a lot of them into, or we relate a lot of them to almost the ET categories, because we hear a lot of reports about extraterrestrials just standing there watching, observing, or even the physical interaction on the bed. So there's a lot of crossover between reported ET activity and reported shadow activity, which again, not necessarily evil. We have Rob Guttrow on Edge of the Rabbit Hole last hour, and he has actually a story in this book, A Walk in the Shadows, about his aunt coming to him as a shadow because she could not fully manifest as an apparition. So this is a human spirit manifesting as a shadow, so that she wanted him to deliver a message to his mother. That's not evil. So we talk about those things in there as well. Unveiling the Shadows, that's workshop. We also got, we threw out more history. And that was another Beyond the Shadows episode that we had earlier this year, where we got a little bit deeper into the history of shadow people. So you can see that as a Beyond the Shadows episode, when we got into that. It was part of Unveiling the Shadows. When we get into the shadow dimension, we're going deeper and deeper and deeper down that rabbit hole as well, with the history of shadows or shadow people throughout history. So, a couple of questions coming in. So, Sarah Youssef, if it was time travelers, wouldn't they have focused intention? Well, yeah, they very well could have focused intention, um, or not. So it kind of depends on your time traveler. Now, if it's a time traveler that is intentionally traveling through time, see, that could be what some of these watching and observing shadow people are. Think about it. If we were to go back into, I don't know, we'll go back 1,000 years. The first thing that we're going to want to do is not necessarily interact with our environment. We're going to, in many ways, just stand and watch and observe. We want to know how things worked back then. Or say you went back to the time of, of the Egyptians. You want to stand there and watch and observe how they built some of these structures that were like, I have no idea how they did that. So that's what we would be doing most of the time, which is what a lot of the reported shadow activity is. And then again, some time travelers are not necessarily intentionally time traveling, but this is more when we talk about like a time slip, where somehow, some way, there's an overlap of two periods of time, and we end up observing each other. Well, we're not intentionally time traveling, but it is a form of time travel because we are witnessing something that happened in the past or in the future, depending on which side of it you are. But that is a type of time travel there. So, Betty Lange, Mike, have you noticed more investigators are talking about shadow people since your book came out? Yeah, it's this was discussed on a show that I was on. I was on Midnight FM a few weeks ago with Lisa Schnurr, and she's known as the Haunted Librarian. And she actually mentioned that like the hot topic of the year was shadow people. Now, I'm not going to say that's totally because of me, but I mean, there is an irony that my book came out at the beginning of the year, and throughout the year, there's been more talk of shadow people. But that's also a question that I have gotten a lot when it comes to shadow people, when it comes to crawlers. The question that gets thrown out there is, are there more reports of shadow people now than there were many years ago? And then it gets turned into, well, are shadow people or crawlers or what have you more active now than they were several years ago? And it's like, well, yeah, of course there are more reports about it now than several years ago, but there's a number of factors for that. There's no way to know if the activity is more now than it was back then, because we haven't been able to record every single moment that a shadow person or a crawler or whatever has been active. We just don't know. But there are more reports for a variety of factors. One, people in the world now than there had been 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. There just are higher population. You naturally will have higher numbers of anything reported. The other factor is that there are more people are more comfortable now talking about this topic. So several decades ago, people weren't talking about ghosts and hauntings so much. You had a small number that would, because, you had Hans Holzer around, and before him, Harry Price. Of course, then the Warrens came along and what have you. So there were small numbers of people that were talking about it publicly, but most of them were frowned upon, by the general public. You were considered crazy or a nut or a whack job or whatever because you were talking about supernatural phenomena. Well, over the past 20 years, that's become a lot more in vogue, and we can thank two things: the internet and television, for that. This is something good that's come out of this. Even whatever your opinion is about the show, and we do have a new rule, or a rule that's been in place for several months now, that we're not going to bash any of the television shows. You can have your own personal opinions. We're just not going to do it on our shows here. They have helped bring awareness that you're not alone. Other people are experiencing these things too. And so by people seeing others on television or coming across people talking about it on the internet, back in the day it was, on a forum or on Yahoo groups or whatever. Now these days we're seeing videos on YouTube, or we're talking about it on Facebook or what have you. People are seeing that and they're like, well, I've had that experience too. And they see another person, yeah, I've had that experience too. I'm not alone. All these other people are having the same experience as I, and they feel more comfortable now telling their story. So there's a variety of different reasons as to why we are getting more reports now about it than we did all those years ago. But if you go back through history, you will still find reports about it. The term shadow people is not new. And I know, some people will try to say this is a newer term that we've come up with, et cetera. But you can go back into the 1800s, and I used it as an example during my history of shadow people. It was a term Madame d'Esperance used, 150 years ago. But she wasn't the only one either. There were other people that were using the term shadow person, and in a lot of different contexts and ways too. So they would talk about it as entities. There's a lot of folklore that talks about shadow people, and then we hear about shadow people in other different ways, not necessarily using the term shadow people, but they will say, like when we get into old hag syndrome, where the term that some culture or country used is translated into held down by shadow and things like this. So we're seeing throughout our world history this term and this phenomenon has been throughout all of history. It's just more in vogue, more comfortable to talk about now. So that's why we're getting more reports of it these days. So, all right. Debbie 08. I have experienced shadow people as the classic shadow man with a hat. I've also seen shadows as just regular spirits. Do you agree shadow people are regular spirits as well? Yes. Yes. Many shadow people are actually human spirits that just cannot fully manifest as an apparition, so we end up seeing them as a shadow. And that's one of the tricky parts of this research, is that when when you're at a haunted location, or maybe you're on a paranormal investigation, or you could even be out in the woods and you see a shadow dart past. You don't know if that's what I would call a quote-unquote true shadow person, an interdimensional being, or if it's a human spirit. The only way to try to figure that out is to continue to investigate and research. Maybe you have to go back more and more times, hopefully experiencing the same shadow, in order to deduce one or the other what this shadow entity may be. Now, when we did the filming for The Haunting, we investigated that house in Edmond, Oklahoma, that I've talked about many times. This was the Monster in the Closet episode. That shadow entity that Taliesin, the girl there, was seen with red eyes, we didn't immediately make the assertion that this thing is a nasty, nefarious shadow entity that we need to cleanse. We had to investigate there many, many, many times. Even though the television show shows us investigating once, it was actually many times over several months. And the information that we're starting with is, well, we need to deduce what type of spirit this is, what we're actually dealing with. And we're digging up the history of the house, and there was some seedy history there, some nasty things that happened there. So is this perhaps the man who committed suicide there back in the 1950s? We have to deduce those things. And so, yes, many are not. You're probably going to have to do some figuring out which one is which. I was fortunate one time, a year and a half ago, Mineral Springs Hotel in Alton, Illinois, witnessing a apparition of a little girl morph out of shadow smoke. So it started off as smoke down at the end of the hall and ended up morphing into the apparition of a little girl. And there were 5 of us that saw the apparition, although not everybody saw the shadow smoke, because they were kind of back in the room and then coming out into the hallway because they're like, okay, what's going on with Mike? And then they saw the apparition. So, all right. And so, Alina the Fam, Mike, a few weeks ago, a psychic medium told me I experienced extraterrestrial beings. My question is, how do we tell the difference between them and spirits? That's a good question. So, I mean, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you just see, like a figure standing there, how do you know? And immediately you're not going to. So, some of these things that we experience, some of them may actually end up being extraterrestrial, and we may not know it. Now, if you see, your classic gray type of alien that people report, well, okay, there you go. that's 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 probably an ET. People report being abducted and taken up to the mothership. Okay, and that one's probably an ET. But sometimes we're not going to know right off the bat, and we may be continuously visited by one of these things, and it may take some time. And I say patience, and one of the problems that people experience is they're seeing this thing come into their room, or it appears in their room. Of course, naturally, you're very frightened. It is an intruder to the house, and we fear what we don't understand. We don't know why it's there. We don't know what it's doing. Even if it's just standing there, very creepy to us. Again, they're invading our space. So, me saying might take a degree of patience. That's asking a lot. I get that. But it may take several times of observing this thing or interacting with this thing to deduce whether or not it's an ET, a interdimensional being, a human spirit. Again, that might take some, time investigating. I mean, if this is something that you're waking up to in your room continuously, and you're a paranormal investigator, then you know some steps to take to try to figure out what this thing is. Betty Lange, are shadow people territorial? That's a good question. So the story that I tell for that, it's a good example. I think, again, it kind of depends on the shadow person and what their goal or aim is. Because I get asked, do shadow people follow you? And I think, again, this is theorizing. You hear a lot of different stories, a lot of different cases, a lot of different experiences. And I think it's more so that the shadows that are human spirits may follow you. So they wouldn't necessarily be territorial of the location, but they may become attached to you and follow you as a human spirit shadow. But some shadow entities, I believe, are more territorial of the location. And a good example of that with 3 girls, and they routinely experience the Hat Man shadow entity walking into their bedroom. 3 girls are sharing a bedroom, but it would always walk toward and stand at the foot of the one girl's bed. Like many, many times. This happened several times for years. And the other 2 girls would lay there and watch this happen. Now, this hat entity didn't do anything. It just stood there and stared at her. When they ended up moving from that house, the Hat Man shadow entity, did not follow them. We're guessing it stayed at the house. The only way to know that would be to ask the new owners of the house if they were experiencing that activity. But it did not follow the girls, so one can only speculate that it stayed there at the house. So I appreciate all the shadow person questions. That's not the only thing we did in 2020. That was a big part of 2020. Was everything to do with A Walk in the Shadows, the shadow entities. We had the Unveiling the Shadows workshop, and I did filming for the Shadow Dimensions project that's coming out. It's going to be a docuseries, and a couple locations that I went to there, the Conjuring House in Rhode Island, and Mineral Springs Hotel in Alton, Illinois. We have a lot of special guests that are going to be with me on that. I say with, but a lot of them were interviews because, COVID, we can't bring everybody together. But, the Johnson brothers, Carl and Keith Johnson, interviewed Andrea Perrin. Just had Johnny Enoch on the other week. We interviewed him, Mark Anthony. Worked with Coyote Chris Sutton at Mineral Springs. So a lot of great people involved with that. Even our Victoria Monday was a part of that. Sam Baltrusis is in there. It's a great project that I'm really looking forward to releasing. So yes, this year has been full of shadow people, and we're going to get more of it in 2021, but even deeper. So we're going to look out for all that. And we're still, how far are we into the show now? Now is just really the beginning of 2021 or 2020. And of course, smattered throughout the whole year. And still yet before COVID, remember COVID was March. Before COVID, we even had more. We had the Alaska Triangle. And the Alaska Triangle is a television show that I was on 3 episodes. The Missing Douglas, the Alaskan Titanic, and combination episode. I was the force fields of the Triangle portion of the first part was the Alaskan Bigfoot, and then was force fields of the Triangle. Basically, force fields ended the show. I say ended the show, ended season 1, I should say. So it was really fascinating because we ended up doing a couple of different shows on the Alaska Triangle between the Hunter Road Media YouTube channel and here on Beyond the Shadows. The first time we had Johnny Enoch on, we talked about the Alaska Triangles. Well, we ended up with a number of people from the Alaska Triangle on Edge of the Rabbit Hole. So Johnny, we had him twice. We had, wow, why does his name suddenly escape me? Jeremy Ray. Sorry, we had Jeremy Ray from MUFON on. We had Adam Davies on. So we brought on a number of people that were on the Alaska Triangle, which was fantastic. That was great, great stuff for Edge of the Rabbit Hole. And then on Beyond the Shadows here, not only do we have an episode on the Alaska Triangle, but we also ended up throughout the year with a number of episodes covering vortex and portal activity, because that was actually a big part of what was going on with the Alaska Triangle. Was so my force fields of the Triangle part, well, they called it force fields, but basically it was talking about the vortex activity of the Triangle. Okay, what's a vortex? So basically that's a welling of the Earth's energy from the core of the planet, from the Earth's magnetic core, that welling up of energy into this particular location on the planet. And that's what ends up kicking off the portals and supernatural activity, paranormal activity, all that stuff. It basically energizes that area. And it's concentrated here for a variety of different reasons. And of course, this region of the world also has a lot of seismic activity. So the tectonic plates up there are always moving, so they get a lot of earthquakes. There's a lot of volcanic activity up there. Something that we didn't mention on the show that I'm actually working on for the book. You have to think about it. This is near the pole, near the North Pole. And the area there, you recall, we get the Aurora Borealis up there. Well, what's the Aurora Borealis? Well, basically that's, solar flares, protons and electrons coming from the sun and interacting with the atmosphere there. And why is it that? Well, there's less protection up there, the poles. The same thing happens at the South Pole. It's the Aurora Australis is what's at the South Pole. It's the same type of phenomenon. The North Pole is the Aurora Borealis. And so you're getting this extra energy off of the sun. And we talk about, when we have a coronal mass ejection from the sun, that it'll screw with electronics here on Earth. And at those 11-year maximums, every 11 years there's a maximum. And it has the potential to knock out power grids here on Earth. So imagine at a location on the planet near, right there at Alaska, in which that protection is thinner and penetrates the atmosphere more. Okay, so now you have the energy that's welling up there from the Earth that you're already dealing with. And then on top of it, you're getting nailed with this extra energy coming from the sun. It gets crazy up there. So that's a lot of stuff that's coming into the book. And we actually didn't touch on some of those things in season 1. Makes you wonder what might happen in season 2, if there's going to be a season 2, right? So really interesting stuff that we start talking here about portals and vortices, and we ended up touching on that a number of different times throughout the year. It comes up as a question quite a bit. What exactly is a portal? What exactly is a vortex? How does the triangle work? What happens? One of the theories about the missing Douglas is that it slipped through a portal. They brought on Bruce Gernon from the Bermuda Triangle because he experienced what he called electronic fog and experienced what seems to be some sort of portal that zipped him through time. He basically lost like half hour, 45 minutes worth of time. And so they related it to, is this what happened to that missing Douglas? And what I surmise is that it could have ended up, whether it ended up in another dimension, it could have ended up in another place in time. It completely disappeared. It was never seen or heard from again. There's no wreckage, nothing. I said heard, but I have to retract that partially because there were some radio transmissions that were caught a couple days later, and they believe it was from that plane. But if it's completely gone, completely missing from another dimension, what's going on? Why did we hear it? Well, sound works on a different wavelength, a different frequency, especially if it's an actual radio transmission. It's definitely a different frequency. And I've had experiences, actually with shadow people, of all things, in which that sound was able to travel from one dimension to another. Now, what you could see visually was quite different because you're on two different planes of existence. But the sound was able to traverse the dimensions, and so that could very well be what happened up there. And that's one of the things that we talked about. They had me on the side of the mountain trying to find, the telluric currents there, and there's some really fascinating things that happened. And so, we covered that on the television show, and going into 2021, I'm neither confirming nor denying a season 2. I'll just leave it at that. But I have the book coming out, so that'll be good fun. I say good fun, but fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. So, all right, some other questions coming in. Tom McNicholas, so you think shadow people are stuck with any place or dimension? I don't necessarily think they're stuck. I believe many of them are able to travel voluntarily. I believe the ones that are standing there watching us, observing us, I think they're there purposefully studying us for whatever reason it may be. If it is an ET, an extraterrestrial, well, it's going to be the same reason we would study if we went to some other planet. We're going to want to know more about the planet and its indigenous life forms. So if they're ETs, they're probably going to be doing the same thing. If it's a time traveler, well, their purpose would probably be to study the past or the future. If this is a time traveler from the past coming to the future, who's to say that the ancients didn't have technology to time travel and come to the future, and they may be studying and observing. But I think in most cases we believe this is more of a future technology, so it would more likely be somebody from the future coming back to the past, again, to study the way things really happened and the way things really worked back here. So there are a variety of different reasons. I think most of it's intentional. I think there are time slips or dimensional shifts in which the dimensions bleed over. And so we have an unintentional interaction, but those interactions still happen. Rick Gabbert, what are shadow people's reactions if their portal that they use was to be closed and they can't use it anymore? That's a good question. So, given the previous scenario that we were talking about, if it's intentional, then I believe they know how to open and close that portal, that they have figured out how to harness that energy. We're talking about the Alaska Triangle, that it seems to be more a place more apt to be able to generate a portal. And there are many locations on Earth where you're more apt to do that. When we talk about like ancient sites of power, um, we talk about, well, people talk ley lines, but it's really the telluric current that's under the Earth that's powering those. The lines are just geographic, and they just happen to line up these different ancient sites, and that's because they were building on top of those sites of power. And then where you have the crossing points, known as connectivity discontinuities, well, those are more powered locations, like the pyramids. So at those locations like that, you're more apt to be able to create something like that. Now, if you're intentionally doing it, you know how to harness that power, you know how to do it. So I don't think they really have a fear of necessarily the portal closing on them. Even if it did, I would imagine they have the know-how to be able to open it back up. For those that don't know that they end up stepping through a portal, well, like we were talking about with the missing Douglas, they're lost to time now, aren't they? Or they're lost to some other dimension. They've disappeared. Up there in Alaska, 16,000 people have gone missing since 1988, and the number keeps increasing year by year, of course. So are some of these people stepping through a portal accidentally? Sometimes we've talked about some of these time slips. We're getting a brief glimpse of that in those cases. But what happens when you get a much fuller experience of it? Do you slip into another place in time? Possibly. It's almost kind of like the movie The Final Countdown. They get sucked into that portal, and it was later on. I mean, it was unintentional. They end up during World War II for a spell, and then unintentionally again, they're sucked right back out. So Victoria Monday, aren't the northern and southern lights pulled in by the magnetic poles? We also know when the solar flares are to the day and we get notices at work to have backup satellites ready. Yeah, well, they do measure those solar flares, so you have an idea that it's coming. So because it takes some time for the actual protons and electrons to get from the solar wind, basically, for lack of a better term, to get from the sun to the earth. So they know it's coming, and like you say, you take those kinds of precautions at the northern and southern poles. Basically, because of the way the Earth's magnetic shield works, it's thinner on those areas. So the magnetic protection around the Earth is thinner on the poles, which is why they get blasted with it more so than other parts of the Earth. So it has to do with the way the magnetics work on the Earth, or basically around the Earth, because we have that magnetic shield, but it's thinner there. It's kind of crazy the way the magnetics of the Earth works, because you have that magnetic shield, but then you have that stuff coming up out of the ground too. So you have a lot of different ways that the magnetism of the Earth is working here. You've also there have been reports here. Even NASA has admitted, like, hey, there's a point out in space because again of how gravity and the Earth's magnetic shield and all of this stuff is working, that there is actually what they're saying a portal. They call it Point X or whatever out there, however many miles it is from the Earth. It's like seriously, but they're saying that's a portal out there, and that's actually from NASA. You can find that on their site. So other things that we talked about this year. Okay, so finally, all that right, and COVID hits. We're just at March now, right? Well, we've kind of been jumping around throughout the year because we talked about a lot of those different things at different points throughout the year here on Beyond the Shadows. So COVID hits, and we had Mark Anthony on Edge of the Rabbit Hole, talking about about the coronavirus and essentially how the Earth's energy is working. Not the Earth itself, but the energy around the Earth, as far as like the people, and the way this is affecting people on a more spiritual and psychic level, which was very, very interesting. How he addressed that. We had a show here on Beyond the Shadows, disclosure and the coronavirus. Because remember, we were going through all that insane stuff with the toilet paper. There's a mad rush on toilet paper and all these other products at the store. But for some reason, people thought that we were going to be out of toilet paper, so they just went in panic bought. And so we had a show here on Beyond the Shadows about disclosure and the coronavirus. Is this why disclosure isn't happening? Because the moment you mention something like this, everybody freaks out and panics. And prior to that, I was in the camp that because the Perkins report came out decades ago, and the Perkins report basically said that, well, if there was, it said many things, but one of the things it said was that if there was basically disclosure of there being extraterrestrial life, that there would be a massive panic on the Earth. And so people point to that report saying, well, this is why disclosure hasn't happened, because this report says that people are going to panic, and they're going to have this massive crisis if suddenly it's known that aliens exist. And so a lot of people have kind of, and I was one of them, that basically said, oh, come on, give me a break. I think most people are going to say, yeah, well, we figured that was true. And so we had a show talking about that, and with this panic that happened earlier this spring, where people are going out and buying all the toilet paper. It's like, well, yeah, that could actually be, they could use that for those that are looking at, is it time for disclosure? Well, they all made a mad rush on the toilet paper and went crazy. So no, we're not going to disclose. So we talked about that quite a bit, or at least for a little while. So Betty Lange, do you believe the Earth has tilted a little on its axis, making weather patterns act different? Well, I mean, the Earth is naturally tilted on its axis, and there's a little bit of a wobble in there, and we call that precession. We have that calculated. We know how much that tilt and that wobble moves, and basically, what is it, 1 degree every 72 years? And for it to make that entire circuit, the entire precessional cycle, is 26,000 years. And if you go to, I'm not going to break the whole thing down right now, but basically if you go through that, this is where we get our zodiac signs and our ages and all of that stuff. So I mean that's a natural thing. We know this happens. All right. So we also had a number of shows, a number of conversations here on Beyond the Shadows about. We were talking ETs earlier, but we got into like the types of close encounters, we got into UFO encounters. We talked about Men in Black. We talked about Project Blue Book. We've probably gotten more into extraterrestrials in this year than probably we have in any other year. We'd stayed, mostly for a long time. It was mostly like ghosts, hauntings, paranormal activity, what have you. We've expanded our horizons here. Of course, we had on Edge of the Rabbit Hole. Like I said earlier, we had Jeremy Ray from MUFON on. We had Jim Peniston on twice this year from the Rendlesham Forest incident. So we've been talking about this phenomena a lot more. Of course, it was one of the phenomena that was talked about extensively on the Alaska Triangle. So, we're going to go we're going to go down that route more and more. I'm speaking at the Laughlin UFO Mega Conference coming up here in end of February, beginning of March. So not to say that we're going all ET and UFO and all that, but it is a part of this discussion of activity that's going on here. If we're it even with some of the questions that are coming out, are some of these we're talking shadow entities, are some of these ETs, are some of the things that we're observing when we're on paranormal investigations or when we wake up in the middle of the night, are these things actually ETs? Are they coming here from some other planet? Are they an ET from another dimension? It's a big question that's out there. So we're going to keep exploring this activity as well. And I know some of you will say down there that I was I was once a man in black because I worked at NSA for a short spell. So, and that may or may not be true if I was a man in black. I don't know if they would consider me. I mean, there were times that I would have to leave the facility. I mean, I was in the Air Force, so I was almost always exclusively in my uniform. But there were times that we had to go to a top secret location off base that was hidden in plain sight in the civilian area, and we would have to dress in a suit, to hide that we were actually military. I don't know if that's technically considered a man in black because I wasn't wearing a hat. But we talked about that in relation to, to ET phenomena, extraterrestrials and UFOs and what have you. So, and I just saw some of the chatter down there. Was the show Project Blue Book canceled? This is what I know about it. So, because it was on Sci-Fi, right? No, it was History. It was on History. History canceled all of their scripted shows. They discontinued all of them, even though Project Blue Book was actually very successful on the History Channel. From my understanding, the producers are looking for another network to pick it up because it was a successful show, and it would be really cool if they did pick it up because I actually enjoyed that one, and I have, one at least one of Heinen's books, and it's fascinating the similarities between. I mean, the show, of course, because it's a television show, they did do a lot of things that Hollywood does, but a number of the cases, a number of things that they talked about, were spot on or pretty similar, or I could at least go back and be like, hey, yeah, that was a story from this story in that book, or that was that incident or whatever. So that was kind of interesting, seeing the correlation. Even though there was certainly on the television show a number of things that were fictionalized, but I enjoyed it. It was a good show. So also, another topic that got brought up a lot this year, time travel. Of course, season 3 of Dark came out, so I had to go down that rabbit hole with Dark, which pretty much my favorite all-time television show now. The show Lost had been, of course, another show that dealt with time travel, but it quickly became Dark when that came out in season 1. I was totally mind blown. So we talked time travel quite a bit, not only inspired by that, but also we've talked about that again. We talked about it with shadow people. We talked about it with could it possibly been some sort of time slip or interdimensional travel or time travel or what have you with some of the things up in the Alaska Triangle. And then we got into paradoxes. So, and that's all related to time travel paradoxes and what have you, which Dark was dealt with extensively. Even paradoxes. Well, what did we get into? We got into Back to the Future and all kinds of things. With those episodes, they were a lot of fun. Getting into time travel and paradoxes, it really starts to make you think. And we'll be doing more things with that here in the coming year, because as we get into some of these other projects with the Shadow Dimension, some of the things that we're doing with the platform that Beyond the Shadows is going to be going to, we'll be getting into a lot more of those types of topics there as well. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So people are throwing down X-Files and stuff. Yeah, kind of X-Files-ish. Definitely like Dark. Yeah, Tom, you need to finish watching Dark. Great show. Um, and of course, all of this relates to the connected universe. Yeah. I've been throwing that term out there a lot as well. I've done a couple of Beyond the Shadow shows on the connected universe. And I even, every once in a while, still here on Beyond the Shadows, I'll show that graphic of how the universe is all connected, that X-ray image of the universe, where it's almost like a spider web, and it's like all, glowing with purple and pink, and you kind of have the white and yellow strands going through there. It's fascinating. I forget the telescope off the top of my head that took those images. But basically, it's showing on a physical level, how the universe is connected. But when we have some of our guests on here, like when we had Johnny Enoch on last week, and a number of other guests have talked about it as well, how we're all connected to each other, how we're all connected to the universe, the planet, different aspects of the planet and the solar system. Everything is all connected together, and we've gone down that route a number of our shows this year. Even just sometimes specifically, we're talking connected universe, how everything's connected, and then when we've done like the time travel shows, the paradoxes, or even some of the things with the ETs or what have you, or shadow people, we've talked about how all these different topics are related and interconnected together, and so it's just absolutely fascinating. So a big part of what's going on with in the shadow dimension, as far as that docuseries, the courses and platform and all that's getting put together, the book that's being written, all that is bringing together how all these different things are connected. So lots of fascinating stuff going on there. And then we ended last week with the monoliths, which was just fun. The stuff with the monoliths is fun. Now that, and talking about connected universe, that shows right there, a great example of how, our, world is connected. There's just, it was probably just a movie prop or a television show prop or whatever that was left out there, in Utah, and it got stumbled upon, and now everybody's creating. I can't even keep up anymore. I put that show out last week, and we're talking about, what those human created. Well, they're all human created, right? I mean, some people are going to try to say that they're alien created. The ones from the movies were alien created, but any of the actual monoliths here on Earth, like the stone structures from the ancients, even these, steel ones, these metal ones, I mean, they're human created. But all of these, monoliths that are showing up all over the world now, I cannot keep up with them. They're everywhere now. But it's, if 2020 could end up on some sort of good note, or at least some sort of fun note, that's a great way to do it. It's been such a ridiculous, crazy year, and now a bunch of people are having fun and popping these things up all over the place. I related it to, like almost like Where's Waldo or Carmen Sandiego or what have you. Where's the next one going to pop up? Where's the monolith going to be now? That sort of thing. And so that's just been great fun and a good way to end off the year. And that's basically where we're going to end off Beyond the Shadows. This episode of Beyond the Shadows, our last of 2020. So really do appreciate everybody this year. Has been a crazy year. Vaccinations are finally getting delivered, and it's going to take a little while to get out to everybody. But hopefully, over the next, people are saying, maybe 6 months or whatever before things start to get back to normal a little bit. And even then, people are still going to be wary and all that. So it might be a full year before we're really, really back to normal. It's been a crazy year. And so, hopefully things will, the ship will start to get righted here, and we'll be in a better place this time next year. Like I said, Beyond the Shadows, this live stream on YouTube will not be here on the Edge of the Rabbit Hole channel in 2021. Edge of the Rabbit Hole, that show will still be here Tuesday nights, 9:30 p.m. on the Edge of the Rabbit Hole channel, as you're always used to. I'll still be getting some videos out there on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel, but as far as Beyond the Shadows, it's getting moved to a different platform. You will still get the audio podcasts on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, all those platforms. KGRA Radio, which the new website is kgradb.com. So you'll still get it all there as far as the audio. But video live stream will be elsewhere. I'll have more information coming out at the beginning of 2021. So, all right, everybody. Without further ado, again, happy holidays, happy New Year. Thank you so much. Let's get into the shout-outs. All right. So thank you, Quarantine Ghost, for haunting the chat, feeding me the questions. You guys had some fantastic questions this evening. Want to thank the Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons, Tom McNicholas, Andrew Cox, Dustin Samario, David Yeisley, and Joe Chandler. Thank you all very, very much for being Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons. Be on the lookout for new content coming out there on Patreon, patreon.com/HauntedRoadMedia. Thank you to the other Patreon patrons as well. So, all right. Yes, Betty, you will be informed. I'll get information out on all my social media. And those that are on the newsletter. So, MikeRicksecker.com/newsletter. It's out there. You see that on the tab, the top tab, newsletter. Just click on that. Sign up for the newsletter. It'll be in the newsletter. I'll post it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. It'll be out there. And you'll be able to find it. So that'll be coming, in probably the middle of January, I guess? Something like that. As far as, when we're coming back to Edge of the Rabbit Hole, because you want to know that is going to be January 12th. Nicole Guillaume will be our first guest of the year, and that'll be a fun episode. So we're talking, let's see, Nicole, what are we talking about? I know I had the topic. If you go out to edgeoftherabbithole.com, you will see the guest list and the topic. So with Nicole, we're going to be talking about enhancing psychic abilities on January 12th. And we're also going to be playing some, we're going to play a fun game. That's what we talked about doing. So that'll be a good time. That'll be a good time. So stand by for that. All right. So what else? I almost lost the chat here. All right, and there's everybody doing happy holidays. And Nick, you've got so many emojis there. I can't even keep up with all that. That is fantastic. Yeah, fungi. So basically basically, it's 3 weeks. I know it seems like, oh my gosh, it's almost a month long, but basically it's 3 shows potential shows that we're skipping. I mean, next week is Christmas week, then we have New Year's week, and then the week after that is just after New Year's. And so, any of those weeks, there's so few people that actually jump on and interact or whatever. It's like, we could do it and then have like 12 people out here. So we're just, we love you guys, but when we only have like a couple of people out here, it's not exactly worth all the time and effort to put a whole show together for that and we're doing it for, to help the guest, right? To, to get their work out there and promote them and introduce that guest to people and talk about those interesting topics. And if there's nobody there, then what's the point? So we're just waiting until January gets back into full swing. So yeah, it's 3 weeks off, is what it is. All right, so let's get to the shout outs. Participants tab here. Betty Lange and Brenda Bound, thank you very much for joining us this evening. There's Debbie 08 and Donna Liska. Thank you very much. Helen Espinoza, thanks for joining us once again. Jackie Campbell and Jennifer Bloomer, thank you as well. There's Joy. Great to see you, Joy. Nick Moulet as well. Pungai Fungi. I sound so much fun with that name. Rick Gabbert and Robert Hanna, thank you both very much. Sean Gilmore's in the house. Hey, great to see you, Sean. There's the Haglin and Tomic Nicholas, Super Chat Superstar. And my co-hostess from Edge of the Rabbit Hole, Victoria Monday. All right, so, excuse me. I appreciate all the questions tonight, guys. You had some great ones, and really looking forward to interacting with you guys some more in the coming year. I'm just kind of scrolling through here to see if I missed anybody. Is Adam Tillery lurking out there somewhere? Diane Hilbert, maybe? Yup. There's Adam Tillery. Finger guns, I gotcha. All right. Tim Schoen, you out there? Okay, guys. Well, again, it's been a wild and crazy and yet fantastic year. We got through it. I know we still have 2 weeks, but we pretty much got through it. And, we're going to come out better on the other side. I do believe that. I think we learned a lot this year. A lot of crazy, insane, nasty things happened, but we're resilient. And we're getting through it. We'll be all right. We've made it this far. We've made it this long. We'll be all right. So just keep the faith, everybody. And see, there is Diane Hilbert. She says, "I am here." I gotcha. And so, again, I thank you guys, and I wish you all a very happy holiday season, whichever holiday you're celebrating. I hope it's a merry and exciting and fun. I know that things are weird, but I hope that however you're able to celebrate whatever you're doing, that it will be fun and exciting, and I hope you have an amazing new year. I know we're all looking forward to turning that 20 into a 21. I like the number 21 anyway. I was born on the 21st. 21 is like a number that follows me. So you guys take care, and thank you so much for all the support in this crazy, insane year. You guys stay safe. Till next time.